Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of the Human Factor Security Podcast with me, your host, Jenny Radcliffe, the People Hacker. I am delighted and a little bit intimidated by today's guest because I have on the show Kerry Tomlinson, who is a super professional, actual, real journalist and a fantastic lady to talk to. So, hi, Kerry. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Hello, wonderful to see you.
It's so good to see you. First of all, for those who don't know you, can you just do us a quick intro of who you are and what it is that you do, please?
Yes. Okay. So my name is Kerry Tomlinson, as you mentioned, and I'm a cybersecurity news reporter. My goal is to translate what is happening in the world of cybersecurity for the non-technical person. So also for the technical people, but in a way that all of us can understand. People who have no technical knowledge, who are intimidated by technology, perhaps in cybersecurity, because it is essential that everyone knows what is happening and how to protect yourself. So that's my goal. I work for a news organization called Archer News Network. And basically that's the goal of this news organization, is to inform people on what's happening and give you ways to protect yourself in a way that you can understand. So that's what I do. But I also spent 30 years as a television news reporter. So I have a huge background in solving problems for people, doing it in a way that is both interesting because it's a TV news story and informative.
I just can't wait to get into this because I met you. I'm going to ask you about those things because I met you in Latvia, I think, a conference in Riga where you were covering the conference and talking to myself and our good friend Kieran all about this type of thing. But followed you since, and it's really struck me. The way that you report these things is done so professionally. You're so prolific and you're so professional at it. So I do want to talk to you about this. But first of all, I mean, how has lockdown been, being someone who reports on the news? What's that been like for you? I know that you managed to get to Mexico and I saw you doing a few things, but what was it like to cover this during a lockdown?
Right. It's in some ways it makes things easier because all of us are in one spot. So in the past, when I would contact people and say, I'd like to do an interview, they would say, well, that's great, but I'm on a plane to, say, Riga, Latvia, or I'm on a plane to Spain, or I'm on a plane to Washington, D.C. And then by the time I get there, I'll be at this conference and I won't be able to talk until afterwards. So can we do an interview in a week? And you say, well, the news event is over in a week. So, that doesn't really work. Nowadays, so many of us are shut down in one spot that people have more time to sit down and talk. So in some ways, it's made journalism easier than ever before.
It's a strange benefit.
It's a but yes, at the same time, of course, you miss talking to real people in person. And that was one of the greatest things about doing TV news for 30 years, was going to be able to see people and meet people in person and hear their stories and talk to them and help them in some way. It's always my goal. How can I help you? Even if it's just helping you feel better about this terrible thing that has happened to you. Maybe it's about actually getting your money back from some terrible scam. Maybe it's about getting justice from something that's been done wrong. But sometimes it's just meeting someone and helping them and even holding their hand when they're going through a crisis. And that absolutely does not happen right now.
No, I mean, let's talk about this then, because when you first got into the news and into journalism and into kind of news journalism, were you on the? Did you always cover tech, or what did you do when you first started out? What was it like?
Right. So I first started in TV news when I was just a young pup, just very young. I actually started in radio news. And it was really sort of by accident. I saw a flyer when I was 17 years old. I saw a flyer about a public affairs show on radio. And I thought, well, I'll go sign up. Well, all of those slots were taken. So the news people said, please come work with us. We need people in news. And so at the age of 17, it was launched, my broadcasting career, my news career. And I did investigative reporting for most of my time as a TV news journalist. And most of that was really helping people. So uncovering wrongdoing to help people. Ultimately, that was the goal. About 6 years ago, I decided to retire from TV news, which is a very grueling lifestyle, very difficult. You miss holidays, you miss family get-togethers, you miss birthdays, you miss so much, and you work very long days, and they're very, very stressful days. So I thought, well, after 30 years, I'll try something new. And what appeared at the time about 6 years ago was that cybersecurity technology was emerging as the most important and impactful factor in people's lives. That was changing people's lives, and there was a lot of cybercrime. And I thought, I can translate these skills that I have in showing people, revealing to people things that are happening that they may or may not know about, why they're happening, why are these things happening, and what they can do to protect themselves or stay safer or stay smarter. It just became sort of a natural transition. That was the next big thing. So about 6 years ago, I said, I'm going to do basically what I've been doing, but I'm going to do it with cybersecurity and technology.
I think you were always destined to do it, because I can tell when I watch your stuff that you love tech. Don't you? You're real gadgety, like gadget girl, tech girl. That's the impression I get.
I love gadgets. I love them. I love things that change the way we live. I love things that make it more convenient or make it different or change our lifestyles. I love that technology. I love reporting on that kind of technology, something that 10 years ago, we never would have used, we never would have thought of. The automation that we can do, the way things change, that to me is fascinating. And I love that we as humans have developed so that we can create these things that dramatically change our lives.
It's amazing to me, because I could tell, and I mean, I can tell by following your stuff that you do, and I suppose when you say that, and the tech has changed our lives and everything, the thing that makes me think is that when you talk about those early days and you spoke to people and you were doing investigative journalism, even though the tech has changed the way that they might be scammed or hacked, I guess it's still the same story. It's just different methodology, right? You must have observed that coming up and sort of led you to this passion, really, that you have now.
Yes, indeed. And that is very true. I do remember technology-wise, how technology has changed my own life as a journalist, because in the beginning, when I started at the age of 17 in radio, we used reel-to-reel tape, and we spliced it with razor blades and Scotch tape.
Oh, wow.
So yes. And that was amazing. And so you would take your reel, you would take it off the machine, you would lay it down, you would use a razor blade to splice it as an angle, and you'd use Scotch tape to edit it on to the next piece of reel to reel. I mean, that was the technology at the time. You could say it wasn't cutting edge, but that is what we did. That is how we edited. Fast forward to now and going through the years, every single bit of technology that has changed to what we do now. Now, of course, it's all digital and it's so much faster. But yes, underneath the technology, what has remained the same is that there are people who want to take advantage of other people and who will spend massive amounts of time and energy and money and brain power to do it. And there are people who would benefit by knowing that this is out there and this is happening. And just by knowing this, you can put your guard up a little bit more and hopefully save yourself some heartache, some headache, and some money.
I mean, I think you do the job so well. I was looking at the Lego, little Lego films before we came on air, and also I have interest in the Kerry does, and we'll put links to everything. We'll put them all on the bottom, and we'll put some stills of them all. But I have interest in how to hack a yacht, and you did that in like 6 minutes. And what really impresses me as someone who produces content, I look at you doing that, and I can see that it's all killer, no filler. 6 minutes, everything you need, boom, boom, boom. It's still so professional, and I really look up to you for that. Are those skills, they must have been honed in radio, and so because you have a certain amount of time, I can imagine, in radio and then on TV. Yet you've got to fill this, you've got to get everything over and done. I mean, is that must help with your own content creation?
Oh my gosh, the competition for time in television and radio is very tight, especially in television, because in radio, you don't have to entertain as much as you do in television. You don't have to be as compelling because people are often doing something else when they're listening to the radio. They're often involved in something else, whether it's driving or cooking or something like that. With television, people are sitting down watching. Now, often they are doing something else, but the idea is that they're sitting down watching and you have to keep their attention. Now, for me, that means being compelling with my information and the way I'm telling my information to you, compelling in a way that you will want to watch and that you will not want to change the channel. That's the original idea. That's where it came from when I started in television 30 years ago, is that you inform people, but you do it in a way that keeps them interested in what you're saying. And competition, I mean, we were given 90 seconds for a story each day. 90 seconds. That's all you get. And some days you got 65 seconds to tell your story. And if you said, hey, my story is really good, I think that it should be 110 seconds, meaning I think it should be 1 minute and 45 seconds, if I'm doing my math right. Maybe that's 1 minute and 5 seconds. If you're saying, I think my story is so good, it should be 1 minute and 45 seconds, you had a battle with the producers. You had to duke it out with the producers, and they would get mad at you because you were taking 15 seconds from something else. How dare you? Wow. So I did have the daily battle because I felt the way I could tell my stories in a way that was more human and not just I am a robot reading the news, but something that was human that people could relate to. I felt it needed that extra 15 seconds. So sometimes I was the pariah in the newsroom for asking for that extra, how dare you, 15 seconds. And boom, you're making our lives miserable.
It's so exciting to hear you talk about this. It was something I always wanted to do, and I ended up going in a completely different direction. But I did journalism courses alongside my main degree, and just like when I hear you talk about it, I think it must have been such an exciting time. But the competition made you tough cookie, Kerry.
Oh, it's
you
so
are.
tough.
I know you are.
It's such a tough lifestyle, and the competition. What I found more than anything was that our managers, I think because of the stress, many of our managers were over the edge. Over the edge might be a good way to put it. So stressed all the time, so hostile and angry all the time that working for them was very, very difficult. Obviously, we had some great managers, but it seems like as an industry, TV news pushed managers to the point where they became angry and very hard to work with. So that was sort of this intensity. You were fighting just to get the story. You were fighting to get the story in on time, and not just by the deadline or you would lose your job, but also within the 90 seconds that you had. And then on top of that, you had this layer of intensity of angry managers who wanted to take their anger out on somebody because of this stressful lifestyle. I was told by one psychologist that I interviewed for a story, he said Xanax was a very common prescription for people in the news because of this intensity. Yeah. Right, exactly. And I was like, oh my, that's an intense thing. And he said there's sort of this PTSD that comes from working in the news, in part because of what you cover, the terrible and sad things that you cover, the child molesters that you interview, the families of murdered children that you interview, and the stories that you tell. There's that trauma that you go through, but there's also the trauma, the intensity, the anger that comes from the layer of management that is trying to make you do it within these tiny little time frames.
So, I mean, it must be though. I think about that, and I think there are days when I just can't write, or I can't, I feel like, especially this last year, obviously, that I just have felt, it's not coming, and it's almost like, I wouldn't say writer's block, because I wouldn't say I was necessarily a writer, but hard for me to write something, but that just wouldn't be a factor, would it? You just wouldn't be able to. So in a way,
you would be out of the job.
Yeah. So in a way, is it a good thing though? Because I suppose if you have absolutely no excuse, you just cannot do it. It's just a red line. Then you must.
There is no writer's block. You do not have time to have writer's block. There were days I didn't have time to go to the bathroom. There was no time to eat. There's no time to do any of this. There's no time for waffling. There's no time to say, how should I write this? There's just no time. Some days, there are days where you can't make it, but you have to make it. You cannot finish this project in time, but you have to finish this project on time. So you are on high level stress for 12 hours straight. And that can even just be a normal day. That doesn't even have to be a day where there's actually some calamity or disaster going on. I was working at a TV news station during the 1989 earthquake in San Francisco, where scores of people died. And there's just no time. That's 24 hours a day. You're just going. And there's no collapsing. There's nowhere to go. You can't go home. Maybe you're staying in a hotel. That you're just going. So if you have that writer's block, you are out of the job. And
so you don't have it, really.
You don't have it, right?
So well, it's a luxury, right?
Yes, exactly.
That's just I find it you must miss it a little bit sometimes. Does it feel like a luxury now, being able to work, we're talking about the progression of tech, but one of the things that's done is enable you to produce quality reporting from anywhere for Archer. I mean, it doesn't have to be a huge network anymore. We can all kind of produce content. Does it feel like a luxury now that you can kind of pick and choose what to report on?
A huge luxury. I remember the first time I sat down and had dinner at a restaurant with my coworkers, and it was a sit-down restaurant, and we sat there and ate dinner for an hour and a half. And these were my new coworkers at Archer, and I felt horribly guilty throughout that entire dinner because until then, I didn't sit down to eat dinner. You're working. There is no sitting. There is no dinner. Hopefully you brought something with you, or maybe you go through a drive-through. Your photographer maybe drives through the drive-through while you're working on your laptop in the front seat of the car. There's no time for that. And it was the strangest thing. These people were just sitting and eating like there was no deadline. They were sitting and enjoying their meal. They just enjoyed their meal. I couldn't believe it. And really learning to stop and have lunch, learning to stop and do something, that luxury of getting to go get a cup of coffee at a coffee shop, of getting to go to the bathroom whenever you actually need to go.
It's amazing to me. And one thing that really struck me about you, like I say, was professionalism was the first thing, because you did that interview with me about social engineering. You interviewed me and Kieran, and then you were so prepared, and it was just perfectly the exact amount of time. And like, if I'd have been a nervous interviewee or anything like that, I wasn't, because it's my topic, but it was just so professionally done. But it was your work ethic as well. And I wondered what advice you'd give to people about that, because obviously the type of working practices that you're describing there, on the one hand, to me, it sounds very alluring in some ways, because I love working hard, and I the idea of being back to that. I had something similar where, and it's like that sometimes in security, you just can't. It has to be in and has to be done, and there's a compulsion to do it. But obviously, it can be very stressful and bad for your mental health. So I wonder, what advice would you have about a work ethic, in terms of, you've experienced that very high intensity now, when there's people kind of glorifying busy and that, like, to me, this says, oh, that sounds great. What would you say to people coming up?
Well, it's interesting, because the things I have accomplished in my lifetime, I have done through very hard work, very intense, very hard work, and a dedication to my craft, a dedication to overall doing the right thing. That was the most important thing for me. When I do an interview with someone, I want to make them feel comfortable. I want to hear what they have to say, and I want to know exactly what they're saying. I'm asking them questions to learn, what is your message to me? What do you want? What are you trying to say? That is crucial to me. And then when I put a story together, I want to truly represent what that person is saying. And the ultimate goal of the story is to help people, either to provide them with information that they may not know, or reveal something to them that is important to them. That is crucial to me, and doing it in an ethical way that is the best I can possibly be. And I think that is the most crucial thing. Now, I have that huge ethic of trying to do things right. And at the same time, separately, you can have an ethic of working very hard. And I feel those two things together really propelled me and allowed me to do the wonderful things that I have done. I've won multiple Emmys. I've won national.
Know. Tell me about the Emmys. I need to know about the Emmys in a minute. You need to tell me properly.
Yes. So, I've won these things by the combination of the ethic to do things right in an honest way that helps people, and working very hard. So from my experience, those are the things that help. Now, would I recommend that people work as hard as I did? I say no, because I worked very, very hard. 12-hour days probably was my average for 30 years. And that's a lot. And if you have a family, that's a lot. I didn't have a family at that time. I didn't have children. So for me, I felt I could do that, and I loved it. I loved every second of it, and I loved doing what I was doing. I would say to people, keep that ethic of doing the right thing, of being honest, of helping the world. Keep that ethic and work hard, but dial it back. Don't work 12-hour days like I did for 30 years. Work 8-hour days, but always keep your eye on doing it well, on being truthful, on telling other people's truths, on working together. It's a win-win. It's definitely not about the money. It's definitely not. And if that's your focus, to me, that's sad. It's about doing things the right way. Leave your mark on the world as someone who has done good things for the world.
Do you know, honestly, it's like listening to a masterclass. It really is. It reminds me of those masterclass. I just bought a subscription to masterclass, and this is like listening to someone giving us a masterclass. I mean, and I knew you would be, because you were just so awesome. I mean, I find that as well, as that sometimes I did an interview a while back. I won't say who with, but when I did it, they said, you send me the 15 questions that you'd like to be asked. So I said, well, you can ask me anything. And I thought, no, I'm not doing your job. You
yes,
should be
exactly.
And I think it's what you said. It's like, to get something right and to produce a quality, anything of quality takes hard work and pushing yourself. But I think I agree with you that pushing. There were times in my life I worked very long hours for a long time, and then it was when I took a step back that I became creative again, and I could get on with things. And you can go too far. I mean, tell us about, so how many Emmys did you win, and what for, and where are they?
And where are they? Well, some people display their Emmys, right? Some people display their Emmys at their homes, and I've just never been that person. I thought that was cheesy, and I apologize to anyone who does display their Emmys at their homes. If they feel that that's what they want to do, that's fantastic. For me, they are packed away. They're in storage. And here's the funny thing. So I believe, and this is the sad part, you can't always remember how many awards you've won when you've won so many awards. So I believe I've won 3 Emmys, and they were all for magazine style stories I did. So I did one on Glacier National Park, and on the park at that time was deteriorating and needed help to survive. And so I did a piece on that and did some amazing and wonderful interviews. The most memorable was the king of the park. It was a 90-year-old man who hiked the most difficult trails in the park just about every day. And of course, he has passed on by now, but he was amazing. And one of the most memorable things I remember from that interview with him is he said, if you don't use it, you lose it. And that is a phrase that I have used to better my life ever since that interview with him. Use it or lose it. And it's true. And what he meant is, if you don't hike every day, you won't be able to hike every day. And that was his passion. And I think about that. For example, I play ice hockey, and I'm long in the tooth compared to a lot of people that I play with. I play with young men who are 18, 19, 20. So, but I think, and sometimes you're very sore and sometimes you're very tired and you don't want to go play ice hockey, which is very intense. And you sprint for a minute and you sit for a minute and you sprint for it, and you can take some hard hits. Sometimes I don't want to. And I think of the king of the park and I say, use it or lose it. And then I go play.
And that'll be why you're so prolific as well, because and why it just wasn't an option to not write those stories and things, because but if you're doing it all the time, I guess it becomes like muscle memory. I know that I did something today and the client said to me, oh, you were the only person on that project that did it. And I said, this is going to sound strange, but it's because I'm so busy. If you want something doing, ask someone who's busy, right? Yes. And that strikes me similar to what you're saying.
Yes, exactly. So the other Emmys were for a magazine style piece. And that means basically instead of one of these 90-second news stories, it's a half-hour news show. And one of them was on a very sad situation in Spokane, Washington. It was a shooting at the Fairchild Air Force Base where I believe 22 people were shot and killed. And it's been many years, so I'm sorry if I don't have the exact number correct. But it was 1 year after the shooting, and where people were in their lives 1 year after the shooting, talking to the families of the people who had been shot. And this was, now we're used to all these shootings. Now these shootings happen all the time, but back then it was much more rare and much more shocking that this person who had been mentally ill and was a member of the military had gone and shot his psychiatrist and many other people, children, at the base. It was very shocking at the time. And so looking back 1 year later at what happened was something that people had not seen before. Now, sadly, it's something we have to do all the time because it's happening so frequently. At the time, it wasn't. It was a very sad, very compelling, very moving piece at looking at how the shooting had changed people's lives. Sadly, many families are going through the same thing.
Yeah. Again. Even just this week, right? Even just this week.
Right. Even just this week. And then there was another one on a firestorm. This was an event that had happened also in Spokane, Washington. Sadly, history repeating itself, where power lines had sparked a wildfire that killed many people and burned down many houses. And it was a situation looking at that. And one of our photographers had interviewed a power company worker who had admitted to not trimming the vegetation around the power lines.
Wow.
And thusly the fire had been sparked. Sadly, this happened recently again with the tragedy in Paradise, California, where wildfires killed people and burned down houses. So sad to see these things happening once again.
Oh, but you know what? You're definitely the first Emmy winner I've ever spoken to. So, sad stories. But I think what I'm hearing from you is, and what I got from you when we spoke about social engineering, and you did some brilliant pieces as well on social engineering yourself, and picked up on it and kind of wove it all together from the event brilliantly, I have to say, and we'll link to it, is that you really understood what I was speaking about as a social engineer. And I felt that was probably from investigative journalism, but partly what I'm hearing from you now is that connection with humans. And that's what you need to be a good social engineer. You need to understand the human, what makes them tick, what they're kind of running towards, pursuit and avoidance. And I always thought that you really, maybe I'm flashing myself and my profession, but I always thought you really understood social engineering from a lot of perspectives.
Well, yes. So after interviewing people for 30 years, you really get to know the human mind. You get to know what people want. You see patterns over a period of time. By the way, can you hear the fighter jets going over?
Fighter jets, isn't it? I was going to say a little bit of interference on your mic, but it's a fighter jet. Of course it's a fighter jet because this is Kerry.
Yes, so. I live near an airport, and yes, a National Guard base, and there are.
I just mean it's exciting. You're an exciting person.
There they go again. Whee! That should be the last one for now. We'll see if there's another one coming. But after interviewing people and being with them at their best and worst moments, you begin to see patterns in what people need and what people want and what they're trying to say and how they're trying to say it. And I feel that I learn from every single interview that I do. I learn a new facet of human life, of the way we think and why we do what we do. I think that's the most important thing, is studying why people do these things. What is their motivation and what do they want? So many times I interviewed criminals and I said, why did you do this? And they said, I don't know. I don't know. And they may not know in the surface level, but underneath there are things going on. And so you interview them further to try to see what really happened. And you talk to people who aren't criminals and just why do you do these things? And what did someone say that led you to the choice that you made? What was it? So I feel like every interview is another chance to learn about what makes us do what we do. And from that, you can see, and then you can, I did use that as an investigative reporter where I went undercover and I would have to learn to say things in a way that would make people take the choice of accepting me as my disguise. Yeah. Meaning if I'm going undercover as someone, I need you to accept me as this undercover persona. So you learn to say things based on your studies of humans. You learn to say things that will make them accept you as who you are. So yes, it is social engineering.
It really, journalists, I always think journalists and very good salespeople, people who are instinctive salespeople, I think are really good at social engineering, because just tapping into what that person's motivations are. Tell me about some of this undercover. I mean, you went all over the world, didn't you? And did so many. I mean, did you cover specific areas or were you just sent as investigations on sort of whatever was the big story, or how did you pick assignments, and were there any that stick in your mind particularly?
Yes, definitely. So the assignments are generally chosen by the news managers. So you present a series of ideas to your news management and they choose which ones you're going to do. So you definitely don't get to just choose what you want to do. You have to present something and say, this is what I think we can get from this. So the most memorable one that I have is one where back when Craigslist was the most popular form of online interactions between people, you might say, there were ads appearing all over the country and here in Portland for young women to do things like modeling shoots. And this still happens, it's just not on Craigslist, but at the time it was on Craigslist. And I had spoken to various law enforcement agencies who had said, these are just ways to draw women into prostitution, into sex work, not with their will. This is unwilling. So I decided I would investigate. Now, I'm not a young woman, so I have to convince these people that I really am an innocent woman looking for an opportunity, that it goes down the wrong path. And through social engineering, you are able to do that. So I put on a long blonde wig and a lot of makeup, right? And I presented myself through the advertisement as a woman who wanted to get into modeling and boost her career. And it did, as I suspected, lead to a pimp. The person running the ad was a pimp. And he invited me over to his house for a meeting. Oh, God. Of course, my station management was very concerned that I would be killed or murdered, especially because he had bars on his windows. It was very interesting. And we always thought the bars were so people couldn't get out rather than so people couldn't get in. So they sent in a female undercover bodyguard with me. And she was there and she was very attractive. So she certainly fit the bill as another young woman who was interested in modeling. And we went in the house and he went through the whole thing of, I'd like to take some pictures of you. Could you just unbutton your first button? Could you just unbutton your second button? Could you just unbutton your third button? Could you lay on this bed? I just think the bedspread is really cool. Could you lay on this bed? Wow. And of course I had to stop it. Right at that moment, I had to say that it was time to move on. But ultimately, it did lead to an actual sexual encounter. Now, the sexual encounter, the pimp wanted to set up all of the encounters for me, his new prostitute, his new sex worker, his new ingenue that he was bringing to make money off of me. He wanted to be the one to set them up. Instead, I had to pretend that I had met an older man at a bar. And so I emailed, he said, have the guy email me. So I emailed the pimp as the man in the bar who was interested in these two young women that I had seen, me and the female bodyguard. And the pimp really felt free to tell the guy that he could get violent with us.
Wow.
Yes, he said, he told the John, yes, feel free to get violent with them, you know, slap them around, do whatever you want with them.
And were you shocked at that point, or was that what you were expecting? I mean, this guy's a sleaze, right? So you kind of know.
Yes, you do kind of know, but it was shocking that he was willing to admit that I mean, I thought that kind of thing wouldn't be so overt.
So casual almost. It sounds like it was casual.
Oh, it was very casual. It was really two men talking about how they were going to abuse these two young women for money. And the agreed upon price was $900. The pimp negotiated the price with me. That was the funny part, is he was negotiating with me, this man to slap and have sex with me. So that was quite funny. Sad knowing that in real life, this pimp was willing to have a man pay $900 to slap and have sex with these two young women. So ultimately, we set up the visit at a hotel, and we had someone pretend to be the John, because I couldn't be the John and myself. So I went into the hotel with my bodyguard, and the John went in, and we watched The Simpsons for an hour on the hotel television. That was our visit. We came back out, and then the pimp took me and the bodyguard to McDonald's for a hot fudge sundae. We had to pay for our own hot fudge sundaes, and he demanded the money, the $900. And then he pulled off his belt there in the booth of the McDonald's. He kind of whipped it off, and he held it up, and he threatened us with it, with his belt, to show that things are going to get violent. You know, things are going to get violent with this. And we left. We gave him the money. It was part of the deal that we would pay him his portion of the money. So that money was given to that man. And later we confronted him on camera, and he denied everything, and of course said he was just the driver and had nothing to do with it, and there was no violence. But that's the kind of thing that really goes on. And I felt it's very memorable in the sense that it was very intense, but I also felt it was a good way to show people what is happening in those ads, those online ads that you see that seem like such a great opportunity if you're interested in modeling, or you're interested in doing some kind of work as, you know, as a young woman. You want to get into the movies or get into something, do something on social media, something in video. You see these opportunities, and just to be careful. Don't let that happen.
And I mean, the impact, even of that story, when we even put that out, I mean, the impact of that is huge. And you must be so, I know you're proud of the Emmys, and the stories that you spoke about the Emmys are amazing as well. But that's such a, you've got to be so proud of this and the work that you did. It's been a brilliant career, Kerry, I think.
Well, thank you so much. I do appreciate that. Yes, I look back, and there are some amazing, amazing things, so many stories. And what was very impactful was people writing in, whether it's email or phone calls or social media, and saying, thank you, because of this story that you did, I changed my behavior, and I do things differently now because of your story.
And you might have stopped any number of young women falling for that exact scam, and God knows where that could end up. I mean, it's an amazing thing. I mean, I could talk to you for hours about all this now, you know, and I really wanted you on the show. I wanted you on the show the minute I met you, because I could see the work ethic and everything that you had. And of course now, just to kind of bring it full circle, you cover security news, you do these kind of awareness videos, you interview people yourself. I hate asking people to look forwards, because God knows if COVID taught us anything, so that you couldn't really plan ahead. But what sort of things are you seeing now? What are you interested in coming up that you think is going to be big and is going to be part of our focus going forward the next sort of couple of years, maybe?
Right. Well, when I first started doing cybersecurity news 6 years ago, I spoke to some family members of mine, and they said, "No one cares about cybersecurity, Kerry. Why are you doing this cybersecurity news?" No, nobody cares about cybersecurity. Fast forward 6 years, we all care about cybersecurity. And if we don't, we are in big trouble. It must happen. We must all care about cybersecurity. We have to. So I feel like my job moving forward is to do more of these stories that just constantly keep us all informed on what is happening and how it is happening. And is there anything that I can do, you can do, we can do? Is there anything that we should encourage companies to do? 6 years ago, nobody cared about privacy. I would try to do stories on privacy and people would dismiss me and say, no one cares about that. Now we're all learning we have to care about privacy and our future is at stake. So for me, reaching the people who don't read the tech journals, the cybersecurity tech journals, reaching the people who are just living their lives, trying to live their lives, trying to work, trying to survive the pandemic, and helping them understand what are the real risks and what are the concrete steps they can do. That to me is crucial. That to me will transform our lives. It will transform our world. If I can reach those people, of course, my stories are always meant to be enjoyable for everyone of every technical level. But I do feel people of advanced technical levels already know a lot of this stuff. So for them, it's not as crucial to their lives. So I want to tell these stories for the whole world so we can all see and learn together how to stay safer, make our lives better. That's what I'm doing.
And you know, a no pressure then, but a brilliant ambition to have, and one I'm sure that you'll fulfill as you have in the past. I honestly, big hero of mine. I am flattered that you'd be on my show. I was looking forward and slightly nervous of interviewing you. I hope I did okay. But for now, thank you so much for being on The Human Factor, Kerry Tomlinson.
Yes, and I have to say, I am a big fan of yours and I love your work and I loved interviewing you and doing at least one story with you, and I hope to do many more stories with you. I love the way you presented things in Riga, Latvia. That was a launch for me on a new focus on social engineering, and I look forward to doing more stories and interviews with you.
Oh, well, thank you. It'd be my pleasure and honor, but thank you so much, Kerry.